There are several issues we need to address. Number one, the issue of where we are. In chapter 20, one of the questions that determines the way we read these first several verses and determines the way we understand the idea of the millennial reign of Christ is the question of where we are. Remember these 7 visions. I'll recap them again. Vision number 1, the church on earth. That's chapter 1, verse 9 through 3:22. Vision 2, God's throne and the 7 seals, 4:1 through 8:1. Vision 3, the 7 trumpets, 8:2 to 11:19. Vision 4, there's an interlude, warfare and salvation, 12:1 to 14:20. Vision 5, the 7 bowls of judgment, 15:1 to 16:21. Vision 6, we just finished, the victory of Christ. That's 17:1 to 19:21. And then vision 7, the new heavens and the new earth, 20:1 through 22:5. We're in that 7th vision. We're in that retelling. So the idea here is that in Revelation 17 to 18, we see the destruction of Babylon the Great. In Revelation 19, we see the fate of the beast and the false prophet. And then in Revelation 20, we see the fate of the dragon and the consummation of all things before we see the new heavens and the new earth. So we need to understand that this is another one of those recapitulations. That chapter 20 doesn't follow chapter 19 chronologically. That's not what John is doing. Chapter 20 reintroduces the idea of the chronology of God's judgment of the world. We're starting again, kind of like we did chapter 6 into chapter 7, if you remember that. Who can stand? Remember that the world has been judged there in chapter 6, and then in chapter 7, we go answer the question, who can stand? So we go back in the midst of the judgment. Here, we go back to the beginning in order to see what God is doing, which leads us to question number 2, the millennium. This is the issue. First issue is where we are, context. The second issue is the millennium. It's really simple. It's 1,000 years. Verses 1 and 2. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and the great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Question number 1 is, what is the millennium? What is the millennium? It's this picture of Christ's reign. Question number 2, when is the millennium? And that's where people disagree. You have people who hold a premillennial position. That position argues that the millennium comes after Christ's second coming. So Jesus is going to return to the earth, and when he returns to the earth, there's going to be 1,000 years where he reigns on the earth. And then the consummation of all things. These people usually interpret the 1,000 years literally, though not always. There are some premillennialists who won't interpret 1,000 years literally. They're usually pessimistic about the future. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse, and then Jesus is going to return. Sometimes this can lead to a kind of why bother mentality as it relates to the culture. Why bother? We know things are just going to get worse and worse and worse, and then Jesus is going to return, so why bother? Why rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic since we're all going to sink? Okay? Then there's the postmillennial view. This is the idea that the millennium comes before the second coming. That this 1,000 years of Christ's reign actually occurs, this 1,000-year golden age actually occurs, and then Christ comes at the end of the age. These individuals usually, almost always, see the millennium as symbolic. Not a literal 1,000 years, but a symbolic 1,000 years. And are very optimistic about the future. Obviously, things are going to get better and better and better. The gospel is going to spread and spread and spread. The world is going to become more and more and more Christianized. And there's the amillennial view. The amillennial view, again, a lot of people just go and they say, that means no or not. In millennium, there is no millennium. That's not actually what the amillennial view is. The amillennial view sees the millennium as the age between Christ's first and second coming, which is now. The amillennial view is that Christ is reigning now. The amillennial view says that what happens at the end of this period of time is that Christ returns at the consummation of all things at the end of the age. Therefore, people who hold this view always view the 1,000 years as symbolic and have an already not yet approach to the future. Christ is reigning here and now, in and through his church, and yet his reign is not consummated until he returns in the future. As we've said on a number of occasions, the approach that we've taken to Revelation is from an amillennial perspective. And here's where sort of the rubber meets the road in explaining what we mean about that. One of the issues is, do we see this millennium as literal or symbolic? And to be quite honest with you, this is one of the things that kind of gets under my skin the most when I deal with people from differing perspectives. Because oftentimes, as you heard, in my own experience, and Sam Storm's experience, and Riddlebarger's experience, and others' experience, there is this charge of liberalism, this charge of not taking the Bible literally and not taking the Bible seriously if you view the millennium as not being a literal 1,000 years. That is so incredibly disingenuous. Why? Well, first of all, the nature of the book of Revelation. It's filled with symbolic numbers. It's filled with symbolic numbers. In fact, at the beginning of the book, the author makes it clear that he's using symbols. So how can it be not taking the Bible seriously when you interpret Revelation symbolically, just like Revelation says it's supposed to be interpreted? Secondly, the use of numbers. The use of numbers here and the use of numbers throughout the book would point us to the idea that we use this symbolically, not literally. Thirdly, there's other things in this text that are obviously symbolic. Let's look again, shall we? Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key. Are we talking about a literal key? No. To the bottomless pit and a great chain. Is the devil going to have a literal chain around him in the bottomless pit? Again, those individuals who would interpret the 1,000 years literally look at these things and say they're symbolic. And he sees the dragon. I thought the devil was an angel who was a fallen angel. Now he's a dragon? And of course, those individuals who say it's liberal, if you interpret the numbers symbolically, don't look here and say the devil is literally a dragon. So again, they don't have a problem with symbolism unless and until it disagrees with them. So Revelation, filled with symbols. The numbers used in the book, overwhelmingly used symbolically. The number of 1,000 has been used symbolically. We've already talked about that. And there are other things right here in this same paragraph that have to be interpreted symbolically. Listen to Kistemacher. Revelation on the whole, and chapter 20 in particular, demonstrates symbolism. For instance, the chain with which the angel binds Satan is not a customary string of metal links. Neither is the key to the abyss a metallic object, nor are the 1,000 years chronologically 10 centuries. The term key appears in chapter 1, verse 18, where Jesus notes that he holds the keys of death and Hades. In 3:7, Jesus says that he holds the key of David. In 9:1, an angel described as a star holds the key to the abyss. In all these passages, the word signifies authority. It is clear that a spirit cannot be shackled with a chain, but can be restricted by a divine command. And the expression 1,000 in a book that is filled with symbolic numbers intimates a multitude, that is, a large number. That is the most natural sense in which this term can be read.